Okay. Well, hi everyone. I'm Anna Jones Crabtree. My husband Doug and I have a farm up here on the Canadian border of Montana and Canada, and I'll tell you a little bit about our adventures in co-creating life here since 2009. So let me just jump in. I've got lots of pictures, tell you a little bit about how we've been trying to expand our pollinator habitat work and our lessons learned. And then I'm hoping to leave a lot of time for questions, Q&A, because I'm sure I can learn a ton from all of you here on the webinar today. So thank you so much, Lori, for inviting me to speak today. And thank you to everybody out there who's helping small critters thrive so that all of us that weigh a little more can also thrive. So I'm zooming in from our farm, which is on the border of Canada and Montana. And it's the Northern Great Plains is our ecosystem. And it's one of the last great temperate grasslands regions that are left on the planet. Temperate grasslands are one of the Earth's most least protected and most altered biomes. And it's this huge landscape, and you really understand your own humanity when you're out standing in it. Our home's a critical breeding area to four of the fastest declining songbirds in North America. And to the east of us, we have the longest pronghorn antelope migration in the United States. And north of us in Canada is a designated dark sky location. So if you like dark, quiet places, come visit. Montana is home to over 28 species of bumblebees, I believe. And I just heard from our bumblebee specialist at Montana State that there's something on the order of 620 non-bumblebee species. And what's so crazy to me is that we, as the state, didn't even know what our bumblebee inventory was until 2017. So it makes me really wonder, like, what is it that we don't even know what we don't know in terms of these critters? So um, here's a picture of the landscape and another picture of the landscape. And I was just a few weeks ago, got the privilege to speak at a biodynamic conference in Switzerland. And it was really fun to share these slides because most of the folks there at that conference really had no understanding or idea of how vast and large some of our ecosystems were. They also continued to ask me, like, where are the trees? Because I said, well, it's a grassland. Trees aren't something that are normally there. We have a really wonderful farm mentor who calls this place an ocean of earth and sky. And I would say others have actually called it the middle of nowhere, where there are less than 5 people per square mile in our neighborhood, and we're 64-kilometer drive to town. Doug and I started our farm from scratch in 2009. He took Latin in high school and he wanted to use the word Vilicus, which literally translated means steward of the land. And so when we took out our first loan with USDA as beginning farmers at the age of 40, we really saw that our mission was to remember that the land and all the critters that belong to it were part of this larger collaborative community. We knew we were going to be organic from day one, and for whatever reason, this place chose us because, who's crazy enough to start a farm in the middle of nowhere in a place that receives 11 to 12 inches of moisture? You're kind of on the edge of the Canadian border, maybe on the edge of farming. Who starts a farm from nothing in a place they didn't grow up? And most of all, you crazy people, you do it organically. So fast forward 17 seasons later, it's really pretty incredible. We really built a farm. We did it with lots and lots and lots of help. And we now have the privilege of managing 14,000 some acres. And our farm, we've had it look very different from the agricultural landscape that surrounds it. Doug likes to say that the rotation around us is really wheat and not wheat. We've been privileged to transition quite a few acres out of a chemical fallow no-till system, and our farm, as you see here, does look very different from the sky. Here it is a little closer. Those are our first three fields. Here's some of our conservation strips, and here's what it looks like zoomed in on the ground. Well, and these strips really aren't just for show. And we started thinking, oh, let's have these prairie strips because we're going to have tillage, which is a thoughtful part of our crop rotation because we are organic. And then we went to a presentation about native bees put on by Eric Mader at Macy's, at Xerces Society. And wow, that really just changed our life because we started to think about our pollinator strips are these strips that were really for wind erosion originally, but how many other functions and things that they could provide for us. So we really started thinking about, wow, can they also provide snow catch besides limiting the impact of wind, and provide habitat. So our pollinator strips have really become part of this ecological infrastructure of our farm. They stack so many positive ecological functions that to us start to have a multiplier effect. So you can look at this slide and say, what the heck? Oh yeah, there's some snow. It's kind of this late, really early spring landscape. But what you see there is that's one of our pollinator strips. And the snow catch that happens because of that little pollinator strip, we can actually see the results of that additional moisture capture in the yield monitors on our combine. That is pretty incredible. We've also found through some inventory work with Xerces Society that we have native species coming back in some of our pollinator strips that we've seeded that were not in our original seed mix. I mean, nature is so really unstoppable. So we have lots of things that we count and other beings we count as friends and neighbors that are all part of our community at Vilicus. And we found that our strips also are awesome habitat, not just for bugs, but also for lots of other of our neighbors. We've also found as we've transitioned from a chemical fallow no-till field that we've had landowners come seek us out because they like our farming system, that we have far less wildlife interactions with our equipment in the fields where we've had longer standing pollinator strips. And every year there's some new fun things that emerge with these strips. It's really an amazing way to have nature embedded inside your farming system. We've done this work to learn to live on the edges. And when we first started the idea of the strips, we got a little pushback and we're told like, wow, why would you want to do that? Because it harbors bugs. And we said, why wouldn't we want to do it? Because we were really thinking about the wind erosion component of this. But when you start to look at this landscape and you look at how many edges there are, and I'm an engineer by training, I'm not an ecologist, but I find it really fascinating the whole thought process around edges, and like really fascinating stuff happens on the edges, be it the edge between the warm and the cold outside with the dogs laying on the deck, or the edges of a lentil root where all of that mycorrhizal fungi is happening and starting to really figure out how to make the magic of nitrogen fixation start. So I want to just switch now a little bit and share some thoughts around examples of our journeys here and trying to seed some biodiversity and native plants here in our ecosystem. So this is one of the very first projects that we did with Xerces Society, and I wish it was such a win. We had such a win on this one. I wish that all of the rest of our strips really looked this great the first year. I will tell you that now, multiple years later, this doesn't have quite the bloom in it, but we had really good moisture that year. And lots of trials and tribulations since then. And this was my definitely younger, more flexible self, but it does a nice job of integrating the benefit of nature into a farming system. So again, you can see how all these functions get stacked just by this one action of seeding a pollinator strip. And what was really cool about this slide, we didn't realize it at the time, but there was actually a pollinator flying around that got captured by the camera. It also shows like how fast nature can recover when you actually give her some space to do so. And all of the bugs that actually start to show back up in these pollinator strips are pretty amazing. The strip also helps us enable our crop rotation, which we now have integrated grazing. So we didn't start with integrating grazing originally. It was one more thing to do. We didn't have the labor, but we knew the animals would be an important thing to add. And so eventually we were able to do that with bringing on some additional staff. Fast forward to today, we're actually working really closely with another organic rancher, and they bring about 350 cow-calf pairs up annually. We graze them on our crops. We get the awesome dung beetles and the manure, and that allows their pastures to rest in the season. And that actually has been a really great resilience strategy for climate change. In 21, 22, 23, we had just awful drought. One of those years, we only harvested 9% of our average production, and that was less seed than what we actually planted. But we still continue to do this work of land care. We personally own 21 Highlanders, and they're super fun. And we joke that the Highlanders actually go hang out on this ranch that's 60 miles south of us. So they go south for the winter where there's better water capacity than we have. And I didn't know this, but another little fun fact I learned as I dig into bugs, and everyone should have a good friend that's an entomologist. But we didn't have dung beetles. We didn't see dung beetles. And then we brought the cows back and magically they showed up. And apparently dung beetles can fly 30 miles. Like, who knew that, right? Like, how do they know? How do they know? So a few other things about implementation of these strips. I think we've got close to 500 acres, or 500 or 600 acres that we've intentionally seeded. We've got something like 300 miles of these strips. And man, not every experiment has turned out the same way at any one time. So it's really about what are the rules or the kind of the heuristics of how you do this. So a few things that we've really learned are that just because you wish something and you do all the planning, you have to be prepared that you can't actually dictate how that vision comes into being. Nature really bats last in all of this, and every one of these has been a collaboration. But I can tell you a few key things. The clean seed bed is super critical. And some people would cringe, like, oh my God, that's a moldboard plow, but it's actually a nice reset. It helps with the weed control. And typically what we've been doing is plowing originally in 1 year and then disking and letting the soil set. This also allows some of the moisture to be maintained, and then not seed until later that second or third year. We've also had some failures when we've been converting chemical fallow no-till land into organic production, where we've gone in and tried to seed the pollinator strips too fast, too early. The chemical residues that exist in some of this soil are really impactful to broadleafs. And so it's super disappointing when you do all the work and then like, oh, nothing comes up. Well, it's because of the leftover residues on the herbicides. And that has also greatly influenced how we actually think about the transition, because you can't also just move into starting a regular crop rotation. Broadleaves like peas don't necessarily thrive in soil that's really been treated just for grains or grasses. So the clean seed bed is really important, and thinking about how and when we do this tillage to create that seed bed, what's the crops next to it. So we also are trying to think about wind erosion at the same time. So all that said, you really have to have patience. And being out here on the prairies, it's a wide open landscape. And so you start to learn how to look at little things and look closer. And you can look across some of our strips that we seed originally, and it's like, wow, nothing is growing. All I do is see this massive Russian thistle. But if you start digging down in it, you'll see the yarrow, you'll see the sunflower things. And often we don't have any blooms until the second or third year after seeding, because it takes a while for all these native plants to take hold. And that can be a little frustrating when you start looking close, but another technique we've had is to just mow, mow after that first year, and that knocks back the things that you don't want to have, provides a little mulch, helps retain some of that moisture. And then often nature wants to recover herself or cover herself up. And so how do we help her grow the clothes that we all love that turn into blooming things that provide habitat? Our strips are also great access into our crop fields. So often we can drive down them. Here's a couple interns that had a good rock picking experience. And this was probably the second or first year after we'd seeded those strips. And it looks like they're green and growing, but there's really a lot of Russian thistle in there. So this is what it would look like prior to mowing, which we did after we did the rock picking. Patience is just really key, and that's hard for me. I'm not a very patient person. You want to see results, and that's also something that's hard to explain to farm funders and financiers. It's not all about just a crop that you harvest in any one given year, because it's really about the investment in soil and habitat and biodiversity. And those things don't necessarily grow at the same rate as quarterly profit reporting cycles. Seed mixes, I could give a whole nother session just on seed mixes and what we've tried, and many of them have been a variety of native. We've done some introduced species. It's a function of what partner we have that might be offsetting the cost of the seed and whether they're open for more diversity or want more diversity. So it's always a little bit of a really interesting experiment. And so, but it's been nice to do this over the long run, over these 17 seasons, because we've really started to hone in what works for us. Like, we know yarrow is magic. We know prairie coneflower comes. We know Lewis flax will always show up. And so that's been really rewarding to be able to get to the point where, okay, now we know exactly what'll work, and then we can try some other things and see how they show up. In terms of seeding tools, oh wow. So back to my engineering background, I thought, man, we'll get a manual, we'll read, we'll be able to calibrate, everything's going to work really great. And oh my gosh, we've tried so many approaches. This is some of our earlier work with a broadcast seeder. We also had a seed drill that we rented from the conservation district. There was a lot of learning on all of these, and the idea of like, how do you actually calibrate? How do you get the seed to feed through? Can you add the peat moss? Is the peat moss organic? Do you have the right materials? And so, we put all this time into designing seed mixes, and then it's felt to me like, wow, it's just kind of at the whim of how things go through the tool that you use. And so we've been on this kind of journey to say, how do we dial that in a little bit more? How do we get a little bit more clear and assured of what the equipment is actually able to do. How do we have it calibrated? And so here's where we've most recently landed is we've invested in a Great Plains grass seed drill. We finally bit the bullet and financed this tool with some help from Xerces Society as part of a SIG grant, larger SIG grant that we were on. And this tool really is magic. It's still kind of a pain to calibrate, but it's has 3 different seed boxes. So there's a small seed box, there's a regular larger seed box, and then there's the native seed box, and that was a game changer. So much thanks to Michael. I don't know if he's on the call today, but the last few seeding projects we've been through, we really honed the seed mix because we had several different kinds of seed mixes. So we have the pollinator seed mixes, but we also have these more durable border mixes. So we have really large borders to buffer ourselves from around our neighbors, and we drive on the borders. But what Michael did is he helped us working with the seed supplier to actually develop the mixes in a way that said, here's the small box, here's the box the stuff that goes in the grain box, and here's the stuff that goes in the native box, and here's what we need to have it calibrated by each of those boxes. That itself has been a huge game changer for us in terms of time savings. And what else did I want to say here? Yeah, the other thing that we've also found is that we've been adding 10 pounds of oats to our seed mixes that go through the grain box or in the native box. The oats help to flow the native seed, and they also serve as this really great nurse crop so that the oats are growing versus, say, Russian thistle or things that you don't really want. And then the oats always die out at the end of the year. And then what's also magic is when the seed gets to us, it's already separated out by which box. So that just has been an awesome help to us. Here's another picture of the native seed box up close. And then here's a picture of a strip down a 320-acre field that has super light soils. So we're actually taking the entire field and we're seeding it back to grass. And we're doing this like 40 feet at a time each year because we didn't want to have the whole field open at once. But you can see here towards the end of the year, the oats grew. They add a little height to the landscape, so they're going to catch some more moisture and just really provide a nice nurse crop. So another big undertaking that we did was it's all about moisture management in our landscape. And so during the drought years, we took on several other fields that had historic hedgerows in it. So you can see this hedgerow in the background. It's just Caragana. So it's nothing that's like massively biologically diverse, but it's growing and it's probably been there since, I don't know, the 60s or 70s. And even though these were originally Kim fallow no-till fields, and lucky us, the farmers had not gone out and taken out the hedgerows because that's also been happening. We actually harvested crop from these fields in the drought. And we said, well, is that water catch or is it actually wind reduction, which reduces the drying of the crop? So you can see also here another picture of at the top right, the hedgerow and just how much snow those catch. So we said, let's do an experiment. We had a field, one of these historic fields where the hedgerow didn't go all the way through. It had been there. And then we said, well, could we do a half mile of it and plant it and see what happens? And so the design was, let's install snow fence. So that kind of bottom right picture in the middle, you can see the snow fence. And I don't know how many of you have been out here on the plains, but along a lot of the interstate highways, there's these giant wood snow fences that go up because it actually catches the snow and reduces the wind and keeps the snow off the highway. So we said, well, could we use that same concept and put in a snow fence on the west side, and then we would seed 2 rows as this eco buffer. So one row of non-native Carigana, which we know will snow catch also and grow fast, and plant that near the snow fence. And then 6 feet over, just do some experimentation with what native shrubs and plants would work. So that has been a very interesting, we've learned so much from this, not just about what plants, but just the techniques of, gosh, how many people do you need to actually seed a half-mile 2 rows of trees? What do you use for weed barrier? What's the spacing that can work so that you do or don't have to go in and do mowing between the borders? And we were working with our generally 30 feet layout for all of our buffers, our conservation strips. So here's just a couple pictures where we're doing a little bit of monitoring before, and you can see what the field looked like prior to this. Here's a couple other pictures, not pretty, but what we attempted to do is we didn't really want to use the black plastic, which is traditional. So we bought lots of rolls of burlap. Thank you, Xerxes. And we experimented with, can we do burlap? Would that be enough just to keep the weed pressure down? And then let the natives and the Cariganas come up. And that has not worked really well at all, although it's kind of incredible. Like, here's another picture, I think, from earlier last year in the spring. You can see looking down the border, it just looks like there's nothing in there. But if you actually walk up close and know where the plants are, it's pretty incredible what has continued to survive. So I'm anxious to see what this looks like in another couple years. The other thing we're doing is we're working with Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, the state organization, because we're realizing that part of what we need to do with the farm is really build some community around it. Even though we are in a place with not many people living next to us as community, our farm, I think, can have some ripple effects to a larger community that cares about land management. And Fish, Wildlife, and Parks actually has some habitat leasing for migratory duck habitat. So we're going to actually be able to enroll some of parts and pieces of our fields into this habitat leasing program, which is going to provide some additional income for us for keeping this biodiversity space open. And Fish, Wildlife, and Parks also manages the hunting program in the state of Montana. And that there's a program called block management where you can actually get paid to have hunters come on your land. And I was talking to our Fish, Wildlife, and Parks person, and I said, Mitch, will anybody want to come, right? Like, we could do a lot of work and enroll this. He's like, oh, you just have to look at Onyx Hunt, and then you'll see, like, people are going to be so excited about the birds and your conservation strips to see that there's actually some diversity out there. So something, again, we haven't enrolled yet, but we're exploring that, because it's really about how else do we drive revenue into the farm for all of this biodiversity work that occurs regardless of what your crop production is. So our immediate farm family, in terms of community, we have 21 Highlander cows, 3 Jack Russell Terriers, and 9 other humans besides Doug and I. Most of our staff actually comes from South Africa on H-2A visas. It's been a little disappointing that we haven't been able to find more people to actually come work on the farm from the US, but our team is awesome and they're super excited to be here. And it's been really fun to help them learn a little bit about organic farming and the complexities and the positive outcomes of that. Our farm and its physical and ecological infrastructure only exists today because we've had tremendous help from a lot of partners. So with that, I'm going to say, come join us. And this is one of my favorite poems of Emily Dickinson. To make a prairie, it takes a clover and one bee, one clover and a bee, and reverie. Reverie alone will do if bees are few. So we cling to this idea of reverie a lot. I think we need more reverie across all of our work. Um, and so a few ways that you can help support us or get the word out. I'm really excited. Here shortly, in another couple months, we're going to have a new e-commerce site. And instead of selling things in semi-loads, we're going to be able to sell Be Better certified grains in 5 and 25-pound bags. So get ready for that. We also have been doing some rye sales to distillers, which has been so fun because distillers are really about telling the story. And so Glacier Distilling outside of Glacier National Park, I think everything that they're bottling in terms of the rye whiskey is now coming from us. And distillers are also cool because it's like a long-term crop rotation for them. You can't just like you have to invest, you have to do the distilling and put stuff in a barrel, and then 4 years later you actually end up with the product. So it's been fun to talk to them about cash flow and how that works. Another thing that's coming up here in June is we have a small grant from the Department of Commerce. And we're going to be doing on the 13th and 14th of June a Bugs and Bikes tour. So the idea is that we'll have Montana Bumblebee Atlas staff come. We're going to do some inventory work in the morning, and then we're going to do a bike ride between two of our fields on the 2 tracks. And then we're going to end with a farm to table dinner. And we've got a set of really awesome partners in that. And I believe Xerxes, we're planning on June 11th, a SIG grant field day to really dig into a little bit more of all the stuff that we've done over, I think, gosh, what's it been, 4 years maybe with them. So finally, go to my website, sign up for our newsletter so you can get information about when our products are coming out and just follow along the adventures of the farm. And then we also have a CSSA program, Community Supported Stewardship Agriculture program, with the idea that how do we drive more income to help really support all this work that we're doing. So this has been a little bit of an experiment, but we're growing it. And for $100, you can have the share of 1 acre of stewardship. My driver for this is, why is it that when you buy an airplane ticket, you can get asked to buy carbon credits? And where does that money go? I think we need to be sending a lot more money and love directly to farms that are doing this work. So if it's not our farm, find a farm that you love, and then let's get together about building economic soil as much as building biodiversity and habitat. So nature works on collaboration, reciprocity, and we should follow her lead. Okay.